Hey, welcome. Welcome to
Say
our
hi.
welcome to our online discussion of September 18, 2015. I'm happy to introduce you, Amy Asbrook, director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. The title just over there, Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. Okay, so
And you are.
I'm Christian Debré, your host. And Toujours Vivant Not Dead Yet is a project of the Council of Canadians with Disability. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disabilities. There's many reasons to oppose the legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Here are just a few. First, it's unnecessary. Everyone has the option to commit suicide or to refuse medical care and have palliative sedation on demand.
Right. And we don't need to change the law in order for people to have control.
And in Canada, it's not illegal. It's not a right, but it's not illegal to suicide yourself.
Right.
Secondly, it's discriminatory. While people without disability receive suicide prevention services if they express a wish to die, people with disabilities will be encouraged and assisted to kill themselves.
And that's especially important to remember in this month, September, which is Suicide Prevention Month.
So, government should have prevention, suicide prevention policy, or a suicide policy.
Yeah.
That's a choice.
Yeah.
You could not have both.
Yeah.
Third, choice is an illusion. The choice to die cannot be free as long as people with disabilities don't have the choice in where and how to live.
Right. People think they're making a free choice, but when you only have one choice, that's not a free choice.
Not at all. If you are in a home for disability people or
A nursing home.
nursing home, I always forget it. Nursing home, sorry, I'm not English. The choice between a nursing home and a suicide, sometimes you could choose suicide. Why? Because a nursing home, most of the time, is a kind of prison that you have the key. That's all, because the rules are the same, plus or minus.
Right.
Safeguards, the fourth one and the last, okay? Safeguards don't work.
Right.
Where these practices are legal, safeguards do not prevent people from disabilities from being wrongly killed.
Right. And though the people who support assisted suicide show studies that, say that there are no reports of problems, the only problem is those studies are reports that are submitted by doctors. But if you look at studies of actual deaths, they show that there are problems that are not being reported in the doctor's reports. So there are problems.
So goals of our online discussion are to give disabled people a place to talk about this issue among ourselves from our point of view.
Right. Ours is a unique point of view in this discussion,
right,
because we are the people most directly affected.
Okay, to organize our experience and expertise in dealing with discrimination and the medical system.
Yeah, because obviously, as major consumers of healthcare services, we know about how the medical system works, and we know how it cannot work also. So.
Yeah, we are the people who are using the most this system.
Right.
So we are the people who know the most the system.
Right.
To take our place in public debate aside from conservative and progressive.
Right, because especially the people who support assisted suicide in the mainstream media, like to pretend that this is a debate between progressives on the one hand and religious or conservative people on the other, and they don't even mention that there are disabled people involved. But if you look at the comments that have come out since the defeat of the assisted suicide bill in England last week, they actually do acknowledge that it's disabled people who were a big cause of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, topics of today, why people ask for suicide, assisted suicide. And the second one is provincial panel of experts. So I let Amy do the show.
Great, thank you. So why do people ask for assisted suicide? There are many reasons that euthanasia and assisted suicide affect people with disabilities. To find the connection, you only need to look at the reasons given by people who ask for assisted suicide in Oregon. The annual reports on Oregon's Death with Dignity program since 1998, and that's 17 years.
Yeah, it's become to be quite significant.
Right, it's a important, substantial number of reports now.
Yeah.
They show that most of the reasons that people give don't relate to death or even pain, but they relate to disability. So in order of frequency, the reasons are loss of autonomy, 92% of people talk about that. Less able to participate in activities they enjoyed, was 89% of the people said that was a reason. Perceived loss of dignity was 79%. So these are all, people can choose multiple. So that was 79% of the people said that they felt like they were losing dignity. Loss of control over bodily functions was mentioned by half of the people. Fear of becoming a burden was mentioned by 40% of the people. Pain or the fear of pain.
Oh, fear of pain.
Yeah, was mentioned by 25% of the people. And finally.
So how many people just suffer from pain?
Right. Well, the thing is that those two things are combined, and we don't get to know how many people are actually suffering with pain. Now, I've heard that when they were separated, it was 2%, 3% said they were actually suffering with pain.
Oh, so we made an assisted suicide law for 2 or 3% of people who claim assisted suicide.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Not the same number that official people said.
Yeah. So I was looking back through some of the older reports and trying to actually find that, and couldn't find it, the separated number, but I'm going to keep looking for that. And finally, people who are worried about financial issues, there were only 3% of those people. So not many. The majority of these problems are directly related to discrimination, because people with disabilities, discrimination against people with disabilities. And those issues can be dealt with through changes in attitudes and how services are delivered. So let's look at them one at a time.
Okay.
Loss of autonomy. When a person becomes disabled, she runs into barriers everywhere, and she needs help with many everyday tasks, partly because of the barriers, but partly because she has some functional limitations. So it's not like we're pretending the only problem is that there are barriers. We understand people have physical problems and makes things difficult, but a lot of the problems come from the barriers. So if you want to go into your house, if you want to get out of your house and there's steps and you use a wheelchair, that's a barrier.
You need a ramp.
Right. You're not going to be able to get out of the house without either a ramp or people helping you. But that's not independent. That's not you being able to decide when you want to get out and how. That's other people having to carry you, and then you have to worry about, oh, is one of them going to get hurt? That's a barrier. So it's very likely that the person will end up in a long-term care facility where her physical functions are controlled from morning to night. So when you wake up, when you eat, when you get help to go to the toilet.
And how you do that.
Right. Whether you get 1 bath a week or 2 or 0.
Or paid for 1 more.
Right, exactly. And those are all problems that have come up recently in Quebec. You know, people only getting one bath per week, and you know, they want more, so they pay for it under the table. That's not fair.
Not fair at all.
Right. But, you know, most of the services, especially here in Quebec, but other places as well, are provided in those facilities, and they're kind of like warehouses for people. To get home modifications, in other words, that ramp we were talking about, to remove barriers is pretty difficult. It can take years to get to the top of the waiting list for ramps and other adaptations. So lowering the counters in your kitchen, you know, taking out the cupboard so you can get your wheelchair under there to do the dishes, that sort of thing. Yeah. It costs a lot of money. So if you have money, sure, you can spend, oops, hello, you can spend the money to do it. But if you don't have the money, you have to wait for years. If a person, usually a person has no choice in who will help them with personal care. So even if the person is at home, the home health agency will send perhaps a different person every day, and she doesn't have any choice about who's going to take care of her.
Sometimes it goes properly.
Right, exactly. Especially if the person has needs that fall outside of the norm. So it's hard to teach the aide the correct method. So the aides are taught to do things in a certain way in their training. And in Quebec, only people with that training can work as attendants. And so if you get a training and you learn to do it in a certain way, but then a person needs you to do it in a different way because otherwise you'll injure the person, the aides are not willing to do it that different way because they were trained to do it the first way.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it's difficult to change the habits. Right,
exactly. And so if if a person with a disability has a new person come in every day, and each of those people is trained to do it.
You have to teach again.
Every day. Oh my goodness.
And some will do it easily, some will not do it easily.
Right, because another problem that people with disabilities have is nobody believes us. You know, we say we need X, Y, and Z, and people say, no, you don't. I know better what you need. You know, this is what I was taught in aid school, health aid school. So you need me to do it this way, even though that might break your arm.
Yeah.
So, but there are other ways to do all of these things. If society redirected the funds toward home care and away from institutional care, that would save money and increase individual autonomy. And if each person received funds to hire her own aides that she trained, supervised, and even fired if necessary, that person would probably retain a strong sense of autonomy and control in her life.
Yeah, probably. And it's better for everybody.
And we know that's true because that's how it works in the United States with the independent living centers that they...
So we know many examples.
Right. The people who, I know people who grew up in institutions, they never had any formal education, but they learned the skills to live independently and to hire their own PCAs. And, you know, they lived independently and they felt free.
And time to time, we heard argument said, if the people doesn't have any medical training, they may injure the people, which is not true because medical training take many months and sometimes many years because they study everything. But when you work with one disabled people, you learn only what these people need, which is a lot shorter and easier because the people, the handicapped people know exactly what you want and how.
Right. And for the person, the disabled person, when you hire somebody, you're the boss, and you know that you get to supervise the person, and you tell them how to do their job. So you have better control in the situation.
Faster, slower,
Right.
higher, whatever,
Right.
but you will ask what you need.
Right. And because you're paying the person has to listen to you.
Yeah. It's easier.
Right. Okay. The second concern people talk about is being less able to participate in activities. And the loss of physical capacity or an illness often brings a loss of energy. And that's one thing that you have to deal with. But it's rare that an activity cannot be adapted to allow a disabled person to participate. So no matter what you used to do, you might not be able to do it as much or as often, but chances are it can be changed the way it's done so that you can continue to do it.
I have saw on TV disabled people doing parachute or doing mountain climbing.
Yep.
If it's possible for those sports, it's possible for many things.
Right, and even something as simple as gardening. The person says, I can't get out of my wheelchair to get onto the ground. Well, it's possible to have a raised bed and have a small garden in a raised bed so you can pull up next to it in your wheelchair and do the gardening that way.
So still possible.
Right, exactly. These adaptations are usually simple, cheap, and very clever. And where, the way to think of it is where there's a will, there is a way. So It's just a matter of thinking of it because probably somebody's already thought of it before. People have been doing this stuff for thousands of years, figuring out ways to get around the problem. So, okay, the third problem people talk about is they think they've lost their dignity. And that's based on what people believe about
which
dignity.
is basically not true.
Right.
You could not lose your dignity of a human man.
Right.
Human.
Human, yeah.
You couldn't. Okay.
And this fear is related to the mania that began during the Victorian era to hide all bodily functions, which is especially strong in Britain and North America. And,
less stronger in Europe and even less in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. People are a lot more open about things and a lot more relaxed in Southern Europe and even in other parts of Europe. Though these cleanliness standards have helped to eliminate many diseases, they have also created a terror of signs of humanity, of our humanity. And they've had another negative effect, which is that people have been keeping things too clean, and children do not have enough immunity resistance, because they don't get exposed to enough germs.
Yeah.
So
many doctors say to a few mothers, let your children lick the wall or the floor. It's completely normal, or eat dirt.
Yeah.
That's a normal way to live. Okay, you should not do it every day and for a long time, but you should do it at least a few times when you are a baby.
Right, exactly. Kids eat dirt. That's pretty natural. Don't worry about it so much. These standards have caused people to be ashamed of the normal phases of life where we all lose this artificial and rigid control over our bodies. I've passed menopause, and I have to pee sometimes, and sometimes I have little leaks, and that happens, but it's normal. But if we all pretend like it doesn't happen, or if we all act like we're robots instead of human beings, then we're going to be ashamed of it. I'm not really ashamed of the fact that I leak, but we all have leaky bodies. Let's see. Capitalism, oddly enough, has come to the rescue.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens.
I'm not a very enthusiastic capitalist, but in this case, I have to say it's a good thing. Companies that are selling urinary incontinence products are doing everything possible to normalize urinary leaks, and they're trying to make it cool to wear, adult underpants and that kind of thing. So it's a good thing. They had what's her name, Whoopi Goldberg did some advertisements. She was very good, made fun of it, made it not seem like such a terrible thing, and I think that's helping a lot. Which is not at all. Right, exactly. But because of this fear that is inculcated in all of us, that's sort of stamped in there, I think a lot of people are afraid, and they think that that means loss of dignity. And if you listen to people who support assisted suicide, one woman, in fact, who was killed by Jack Kevorkian, that was the trigger. She had a urinary leak, and she said, "That's it. I don't want to do this anymore." And that's when she went to Jack Kevorkian. So it's kind of an extreme reaction.
Yes.
Another thing that people talk about, fear, is a fear of becoming a burden. And governments are doing everything they can to reduce spending on people with disabilities. And they have relied heavily for a long time on the idea that the family caregiver is the natural way to do things. So they expect that somebody in the family is going to take care of the person. In French, they even use the term aidant naturel, or natural aids, but that isn't used in English. But the idea is certainly used. Family members, who are usually women, are obliged to provide personal care to disabled people free of charge. So there's no support for these people.
And it's going against how the society is built now. Women have to work, men have to work, both have to work, and we're working more than we was 20 years ago.
Right.
So we doesn't have much time to give to our elderly people or for children.
Right, exactly. Because of the way the economy is developed, people have to have those two incomes. Even so, they can't keep up. And if one of the breadwinners can't work, that causes a big problem. And there's no compensation for that work. There never has been, but before it was easier for a family to survive on one income. Now that's not possible.
Yeah. Before, one income was enough. Today, even two incomes sometimes is not enough.
Yeah. If there were respite if there were respite services, so services that would come in while you needed to take a break, and support to allow the caregiver to work, sleep, rest, or do whatever they needed to do, and income guarantees, it might work for some people. This idea of having a family member who's the caregiver. However, these support services are inadequate. I'm sorry, excuse me. They're inadequate at best for family caregivers, which can sometimes lead to abuse and neglect of disabled people. So sometimes they're not even available, these services. And if the person is too stressed, sometimes it can lead to an abusive situation. In addition, sometimes the natural role of the caregiver is not natural at all under the circumstances. So, for example, it's not appropriate to expect an adolescent boy to help his single mother with toileting.
Yeah, just think about it. It's completely, you shouldn't.
Yeah. It sort of warps the relationship. And that applies to husbands and wives too. A relationship between a husband and wife is supposed to be a mutual, equal relationship, but when one person is very dependent on the other for, survival care,
it twists the relationship.
It does. And it puts stress on the relationship, a kind of stress that, makes it very difficult. And yes, husbands and wives are supposed to love each other and blah, blah, blah. But the number of when one person becomes disabled, it often breaks up marriages, especially when it's the woman who becomes disabled. The man often leaves. So we understand that sickness and health is part of the deal, but in the end, it doesn't always work that way. And it's certainly not appropriate to expect a woman to submit to abuse by her husband because he's the only one available to provide personal care. But it happens a lot that women can't get out of abusive relationships because there's no one to provide care and no one to, no money to pay for it.
It's happened quite a lot.
Right. So a person with a disability should have funds to hire and pay for her own assistant. And, that's kind of the solution to that problem. Now, the question of pain. The supporters of assisted suicide and euthanasia say that these practices are necessary to prevent people from dying in horrible pain. They remind their audiences of family members or friends who have died in screaming and horrible pain. But this doesn't square with the low rank held by pain on the list of reasons people give for asking for assisted suicide, especially since it also includes the fear of pain.
Yeah,
so
25%.
Only a quarter of the people mention it, and it's people. A lot of those are people who are just afraid of pain, who don't actually have pain at the moment.
Yeah. So the real pain is anywhere between 2 to 5%.
Right. Exactly. Palliative care can eliminate physical symptoms in 95% of the cases.
So they made a law for 2 to 5% of a very low minor minority people who ask for assisted suicide.
Right.
It's kind of bizarre. You made a big law for a very, very tiny population.
Right.
Part of the population.
And it's not just that they made the law, but the law is dangerous for many more people than would benefit from it. When people talk about suffering, and that's often the way they put it, they mostly mean grief and loss of status in society and the belief that they have less value as ill or disabled people. Those are some of the reasons people talk about suffering.
In the right of human, this is one of the most important things. Every human is equal in right.
Right, exactly. But in reality, disabled people are less respected in society. We are less valued. And really, nobody wants to become disabled. We get that. We understand that. But the problem isn't getting rid of disabled people. The problem is making it better to be a disabled person.
Yeah, that's the way. It's not funny to become disabled, but it's not a reason for just renounce of life.
Right, exactly. The one thing that palliative care does, in addition to dealing with physical symptoms, is that they deal with these emotional problems that come up. They help you deal with grief. And they help you deal with adjustment issues and working things out with your family. But they do it in a way that's supportive and doesn't say, oh, your life is a tragedy, it's horrible, it's all over just because you've become disabled. And that's the difference between having good counseling and having bad counseling. And there are certainly a lot of bad counselors out there who act like if you have a disability, all of your problems are related to your disability, not the way you're treated and not other problems that you might have in your life. So when a person, getting back to the pain issue, when a person dies in pain, it's not a problem with medical science, it's a problem with medical practice.
Yeah, a lot of doctors doesn't receive enough for training about pain.
Right.
And I know that.
Right. Medical science is capable of dealing with the pain issue. It's not that. It's how medicine as a practice is organized. Doctors receive little training in pain management, and they are not oriented toward palliative care. They're oriented toward curing a disease or getting rid of the symptoms, but not dealing with pain. So, doctors don't want to prescribe opiates, the class of drugs that comes from morphine and heroin, and there are a lot of other drugs that are very effective painkillers.
But they are fear. They suffer from fear to give people they fear to create
Drug addicts.
Drug addicts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not true.
Right.
If a people is close to die a year, a month, or a week,
Right.
doesn't matter if he became an addict. And even if somebody is younger and suffered for heavy pain, even if he became an addict, doesn't really matter.
Right.
If he suffer, relieve the suffering.
Right.
It's very, very important.
And in fact, before there were laws, punitive laws about drugs, many people functioned as addicts. And the reason they were able to function is because they were able to get the drugs that they needed without stealing, without having to cause trouble. They were just able to go down to their pharmacy, get the drugs they needed by buying them over the counter, and they could support their habit easily. And so they didn't need to cause trouble in order to continue. And they were doctors, and they did all kinds of professions. Now, so the problem really isn't so much people being addicted, although, you know, being addicted isn't fun and it's not great, but the biggest problem to society with addiction to opiates is that people, you know, when they cannot get their drug, they cause problems. So that's more, again, it's more of a social problem than a medical problem. Okay, also families are reluctant to, you know, you have somebody who's very ill and in a lot of pain, but the families are often reluctant to question the doctors for fear of either antagonizing the medical staff or being labeled as a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience when you were in the
Yeah,
hospital.
you know.
Yeah, well,
I was in great pain in the hospital because I suffering from what you call it, stenosis, spinal stenosis, and it's awful as a pain.
Yeah.
And I was like that for more than an hour,
Yeah.
and nobody take care about it.
Yeah.
And Amy just tried to do something very politely. But at the end, she saw me very torturing and very suffering, and she just lose a little bit of her mind. And instead of taking care of me and get rid of the problem, they just menace her to be expelled.
Yeah, they threatened to throw me out of the hospital rather than taking care of him. So all that to say that problems named by people who ask for assisted suicide and euthanasia are linked to disability, and they have already been solved by disability rights activists, a lot of them through the independent living movement and through the rehabilitation process. The solution must be fully implemented by governments and by society in general in order to prevent the conditions that cause requests for assisted suicide. But often these things are not implemented, and otherwise we would have home-based services that people control themselves. So the other issue that we're going to talk about very briefly today is the provincial expert panel. And this is just to give you a heads up that the provincial panel, which was named by the head of social services and health in Ontario, has put a deadline of September 24th to make comments on their online form. You can find the survey at www.ontario.ca/doctor-assisted-dying-and-life-decisions consultation. It's going to be up.
Ow!
It's
Dash,
gonna,
dash, 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 dash. Ow.
It's going to be on our Facebook page, so you can
Yeah, better.
link directly to that. And just for
And
your
it's worse in French.
right,
Not because of dash. It's because you have to ask for a special
right,
one.
right. In French, you have to ask for a special form. So, to view our videos, do a search on euthanasia and disability, either on Google Hangouts on Air or on YouTube, or you can just do a Google search. If you want to join us directly, send me your email address and I will send you a link to join in about 15 minutes before the program. And you can email me that your email address at info@tv-ndy.ca. For more information about the subjects we talk about here, go to facebook.com/toujourdsvivant, not dead yet. Go to our website at tvndy.ca, or you can follow me on Twitter at TVNDY. Thanks, Christian, for helping out.
Thank you, Amy.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next week. Take care, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.